I have been adoring the absolute love that Dragon Quest has been receiving as a series in recent years. Sure, it's been over 4 years since the teaser trailer for Dragon Quest XII, but in that time we've had Dragon Quest Builders 2, Dragon Quest Treasures, a new Dragon Quest Monsters, Dragon Quest III HD 2D, and Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D. It feels like the perfect moment to introduce more classic Dragon Quest games to a Western audience that's finally paying attention. So imagine my surprise when Dragon Quest VII was revealed to be the next game receiving the remake treatment. Not Dragon Quest IV, the next game in the lineup, not Dragon Quest V, a game that's often debated as the best in the series, not Dragon Quest VIII, the Western favorite that kickstarted a new generation of fans. No, Dragon Quest VII, the game that's often labeled the black sheep of the series alongside Dragon Quest II. It just seems like such an odd choice, especially since it received a 3DS remake back in 2016 that seemingly fixed most of its issues. But this is no remastered port of that version. It's a full-on remake that will further refine and streamline the game. Because if there's one thing that everyone knows about Dragon Quest VII, it's that it's long, easily reaching 100 hours of gameplay. And this new reimagined version is seeking to slim that down. The development team has already revealed that they have removed storylines in the hope of improving the game's tempo. These include Grondel, El Ciclo, and Providence. There have been other cuts as well, mostly to side activities, but I want to focus on pacing for this video because, I'll be honest, I've never played Dragon Quest VII before in either its original PS1 form or the 3DS remake. The only thing I knew about the game was that it apparently took 4 hours for the first fight to happen in the original, which was then cut to half of that for the remake. And that's the aspect that makes everyone balk. It's too slow. It's too much. But that made me curious. What is it that makes this introduction so long? And what was changed in the remake? Would it see further streamlining and reimagined? That's what I decided to find out. I would play until Dragon Quest VII opened up and random battles became common. How long did that take in each game, and how was that time spent? Well, allow me to guide you through the openings of Dragon Quest VII on the PS1 and 3DS. So let's begin with the PS1 version and set the scene. The year was 2001. It had been 6 years since Dragon Quest VI released on the Super Famicom, and the PS1 was dominating the RPG space. The genre had exploded in the West thanks to the likes of Final Fantasy VII, while Dragon Quest had completely skipped localizing their 16-bit efforts. Presumably, Enix saw this as a prime opportunity to break into the Western market, hence the actual localization. Unfortunately, by the time Dragon Warrior 7, as it was still called then, released in the West, Final Fantasy IX had also come out. And comparing the two graphically would always leave it the loser. Of course, this graphical difference didn't matter in Japan, where it was still an unmitigated success. In fact, the announcement that Dragon Quest VII would not release for the Nintendo 64 DD and instead the PlayStation created a crisis for Nintendo as analysts questioned the viability of Nintendo's effort. Even more stunning is that it was expected to be so successful in Japan that it would create a 50 billion yen effect on the economy, with sales reaching 3.8 million. It sold 3.57 million in 17 days, outselling Final Fantasy IX in its home country by 1 million units. Make no mistake, Dragon Quest VII is a success. But how does it all begin? Well, there's only the slightest use of CG, which is merely used to establish a setting, as fans feared Dragon Quest would lose its identity if it indulged in those new storytelling techniques. But our hero comes from the humblest of beginnings, the son of a fisherman who just so happens to be friends with the prince of the island. These two are looking for adventure, positive that there must be more to their world than the endless sea that lies beyond. But they also keep their exploration secret, even from the mayor's daughter, Maribel, as most of the townsfolk don't like the idea of digging any further into this world. The gameplay actually begins at night with the player free to explore this small fishing village. And it's here where I decided to treat this experiment like any other RPG I play through. I explore every inch and I talk to every NPC. This wouldn't be an attempt to reach combat as soon as possible, but quote-unquote a normal playthrough. So let the looting begin. Though this is also where I made my first mistake. I had no idea there was a universal select button, a way to easily talk to NPCs or check items. Dragon Quest is typically so traditional that I figured that even at this point, the game still expected players to use the pop-up menu. As I would learn later, it does not, so this does slightly inflate the time. It is still night though, so not everything is available, and it turns out there's plenty of time in the morning. People to talk to, more items to find, and everyone abuzz for the Amid harvest led by your father, a master fisherman. It turns out this harvest is meant to catch fish for the entire kingdom and last for presumably a while. While the eventual hero helps his dad, he's not actually joining in on this trip, although Maribel wants to as she's hiding amongst the barrels on the ship. And this is where I learned that there was an action button. After all, searching barrels didn't destroy them, but picking them up and throwing them with the action command sure does. Naturally, this also ruins Maribel's hiding place, and she's promptly kicked off before the boat sets sail. It's then that the hero is asked to speak with the king at the castle, and Maribel decides to join, as it's an opportunity to shop around the nearby town. Entering the overworld usually brings out the monsters, but Dragon Quest VII is dedicated to selling its story. There are none. This is a peaceful island. It's also small, with only a tiny cabin where a guy likes to talk to animals, ruins that seem ignored by most of the residents, and the aforementioned castle and accompanying town. As soon as the hero reaches the town, Maribel goes off on her own, leaving me to loot and chat. It's here that I learn about Prince Kefir and how the people wish he would settle down and act more like royalty. Instead, he seems incapable of sitting still and irreverent to any authority. And then there's the hero's uncle, a layabout, a mooch, and even a peeping Tom according to one villager. He's the complete opposite of your father, and I still have no clue what his role in the story might be. It's also possible to find Maribel talking with a boy who obviously is interested in her, but she's aloof about him. She seems to enjoy the attention more than anything else, though some in town think she's just selfish. It's a small island, people talk, and there's certainly plenty of gossip to go around. Before I head to the castle, I also find an underground path leading to a hermit. He mostly shoos me away at this point, but it does emphasize how much there is to see. Once inside, there's plenty more to explore. 3 separate floors, more NPCs with dialogue describing the relationship between Kefir and the king, and even a shop to buy some equipment. It's worth noting that money has been sparse, but with enough exploration, it's possible to find a full loadout for the hero, barring a shield. Fortunately, I found enough money for the shield and am now equipped for combat, however long that takes to happen. While there's plenty of castle to explore, it's not fully open since as soon as I step onto the second floor, the king appears, livid at Kefir for some reason. I've still yet to play every Dragon Quest before this, but it's a stark difference to the calm, composed kings that graced the first 2 games. This is a king who has had it with his son, to the point that he drags the hero to the throne room and forces him to sit while he interrogates. No matter what you say, the king will lay out what Kefir has done. The boy has been incredibly restless lately, gallivanting across the kingdom as if possessed, with no indication as to why. And now he's stolen a priceless ring once owned by the late queen. The king begs the hero to talk some sense into Kefir before allowing him the run of the castle. It's even possible to find Kefir's sister, the princess, who seems to understand her brother, agreeing with him that it'd be more exciting if some other island and kingdom actually existed in this world. She never joins, but it's a nice sibling moment. In fact, that is what has stood out to me up until now. This isn't advanced or complex dialogue by any means, but it establishes the setting well. Talking emphasizes the personalities of the royals, or even the solitary country of Estard itself. It makes sense why Kefir and the player would yearn for adventure. There's even an old man who will tell of a myth where God defeated the demon lord and sealed him away before disappearing himself. Potential is the word that kept ringing in my head as I played. The next task is finding Kefir, and the game gives no indication of that. He's not in his room, he's not in town, so that only leaves the one place I haven't explored yet, the ruins north of the fishing village. In fact, the opening cutscene even clued the player into this, as it's here that the 2 boys emerged from. At least I assumed that. But sure enough, Kefir is here, inspecting a suspicious statue. He hands over an ancient scroll depicting the statue along with tablets written in a foreign language. This is what's been driving Kefir. The reason he stole his mother's ring was because of the rare sunstone embedded in it. He believes that the light radiating from the statue in the scroll is the key to unlocking its secrets. His logic is sound, especially the idea that scholars labeling the ruins as forbidden was incredibly suspicious. Something must be there if they're giving it that kind of name. Unfortunately, the ring doesn't work, and it's here that the opening becomes a bit aimless. At this point I had explored everything, even a passage in the ruins that led to an almost dock-like area. You just know that some kind of boat is going to end up there eventually. But there's nothing of substance here, and Kefir himself offers no guidance. He's going to try to figure something out on his own and ask the hero to do the same. So I talk to a few guards who only repeat that I should try various things, the king who merely says he trusts my judgment, and my mom who says to be nice to the prince. I want to talk to Maribel, but she's no longer in town or even the fishing village. But that's weird because her mom says that she went to town again, so where is she? Talking to everyone in the castle town nets me nothing except that the hero's uncle had recently come upon a strange stone. That had to be it, right? Well, I borrowed that stone, called a hot stone, from my uncle as he slept off a drunken stupor, returned to the statue, tried to use it, and nothing happened. At this point, I've got nothing. I can return the hot stone to my uncle, but I don't see the purpose of the item, and no matter where I search in town, I can't find Maribel. Well, it turns out I was inadvertently tricked, because Maribel is in her own house. Turns out her mother was still referring to when Maribel went with me to the castle town. Oh, wonderful. And yes, Maribel is who I needed to talk to as she notices the scroll and suggests talking to the owner of the item shop to decipher it. And the item shop owner will not trigger unless Maribel is spoken to first. However, he doesn't know what to make of it and suggests the old hermit as he's ill-tempered but wise. A quick trek there does the trick, and after convincing him that you don't want to just sell it, he promises to translate it if given some time. This is the perfect opportunity to report to Kefir, who has returned to his room. Excited by the prospect of figuring out what the scroll means, Kefir officially joins the party, meaning it's time to return to the hermit. Sure enough, the translation is finished, and the light surrounding the statue has nothing to do with the sun. Instead, it represents the pure heart of the Chosen One. Only if this person prays before the statue will the nearby sealed door open. It's here I should mention that I actually really like Kefir. His design makes me think he'd be arrogant or a brat, but instead he comes across as genuinely curious, desperate to expand his horizons, and so self-assured that he's positive that he's the chosen one that can create miracles. And sure enough, praying at the statue does open the way. Getting to this point was certainly meandering, but it did emphasize the adventure aspect. It's a mystery, and these two boys are trying their best to discover some kind of secret. The scenario comes across as how two friends would act in this situation. I did get annoyed because of my misinterpretation of where Maribel was, but that's mostly my fault. And some of Maribel's mom. I'm not sure how I feel about two soldiers appearing to take Kefir away to talk to his father though. Considering it only serves to put the hero back in his house at night with Kefir sneaking in to take us, it seems like a pointless diversion. The player is well aware by this point how much the king and prince don't get along. There's little reason to emphasize that even further. As far as I can tell, it's only so the two sneaking off to the shrine happens at night. Praying at the statue does the trick though, and the door to the shrine opens. And it's this section that's my favorite in the entire opening. There's a real mystique to everything here, the ancient structures, the hero suddenly being able to read the ancient writing, and most importantly, the puzzles that need to be solved to even unlock its secrets. To open the way forward, 4 pieces of equipment must be obtained and placed on 4 saints: a sword, a shield, armor, and a helmet. Finding them involves solving different puzzles. The first involves a central flame that can be put out, and depending on the direction it was snuffed from, the statue on the opposite side will reignite it. After some experimentation, I realized that the right side statue was hiding a switch, which opened a door to the first piece of Saint's equipment, the helmet. Further inside, there's a scale that must be written and blocks pushed in order to make it past a blocked door, which then leads to a test of courage. The righteous will receive a key, the wicked will lose their hand in the lion statue's mouth. But our hero is a good boy, so key it is. Backtracking to an earlier locked door, the key allows the duo inside where a mural of 4 bare trees with only a single leaf resides. I quickly realized that the leaf's positioning determined which direction I should go on the branching paths just beyond. On the other side lies a waterway with the left side filled and the right side empty. Moving a crystal ball from one dragon's claw ornamentation to another shifts the water to the other side, allowing me to use a raft on that side to reach a previously unreachable staircase. At the bottom is a set of 4 pillars that raise or lower depending on the button pressed. Each pillar can be looked through, although the angle is always in a different direction. The trick is to make sure the view isn't blocked by another pillar so a mural depicting several classic monsters can be seen. But nothing inherently happens with this information, so I explore the waterways beyond this one stairwell. It's then that I find a room with 6 monsters depicted on slabs and 4 colored tiles. I remembered that each pillar also had a color associated with it and realized what I had to do. After a quick trek back to the pillar room, I noted each of the monsters for every color and then went back to the slabs to place the monsters on the appropriate tile, opening the way forward. With that, I finally have the Saint's armor. What I like about this section is that not everything is obvious, and yet it's not difficult. There are clues scattered throughout indicating how the Saint's equipment is found, but executing those ideas left me stumped at times. For example, I could see a chest across a waterway, but I didn't know how to reach it, so I wandered the shrine trying to think of what I should do. Then the obvious strikes. I used a raft to cross over to the stairwell. What if I had more control? I had merely assumed that it was a one-way ride, much like the raft in the original Legend of Zelda. But no, it's fully controllable, and by riding it down the waterway, I find a different chest containing the Saint's sword, and then easily reach that chest where the Saint's shield awaits. From there, I merely have to return to the statues, read the inscriptions to see which piece goes where, and unlock the sealed door. It's simple, yet satisfying, especially because this kind of puzzle solving isn't interrupted by random battles. I can focus on the puzzles themselves. Speaking of, they're far from over, as the next puzzle room contains 2 statues, 2 torches containing red and blue flames, and a lot of braziers. Lighting the statues with the appropriate fires reveals which of the grid of braziers should then be lit. Do that with both colors, and the next door opens. And with that, the puzzles are mostly done. I say mostly because Kefir and the hero discover a land shard tablet that Kefir recognizes from tomes and depicts a portion of a map. The nearby stone states that the world had been divided into 4 sources and hidden. Only by returning artifacts to their rightful place will this hidden world be revealed. Investigating the rooms further reveals tables with missing shards, and each room themed to a color. Another shard is found along the way, and inspecting the table that matches its color allows me to place the 2 pieces into place. One is still missing though, and Kefir mentions that the duo can either keep exploring or call it a day, as they've been at this for quite a while. With no sign of the last shard anywhere, I return to the shrine entrance, where it's already morning. Kefir's not deterred in the slightest though, and puts the next task at hand: research these shards and see if they can find the final one of this set. For the hero, that means going back home, and after all this time, his dad has returned from the Amit harvest with an absolutely massive haul. The people are celebrating, Maribel is reminded that she couldn't go and wishes she were a man, and Dad has already returned home. Although our uncle has also arrived, promptly eating the hero's breakfast, drinking a bottle of wine, and passing out on the bed. I seriously wonder how this man is going to come into play later in the game. But talking to Dad has him reminisce on the last time he had such a big haul, which just so happened to be the year the hero was born. In fact, the hero was born after just 5 months, though completely healthy. This is another nugget I find myself curious about, despite it definitely not coming up again in this opening. More important is the strange slab that got tangled in his nets. He gives it to the hero and suggests showing it to the king, but I think we all know where this is going by this point. Returning the Kefir in the castle, he chalks the coincidence up to fate and is immediately ready to return to the shrine, though I do make a point of talking to the king. A villager had mentioned that this huge harvest would put him in a good mood, and that certainly seems to be the case. He's looking forward to the next meal and even tells Kefir that no matter what choice he makes, he believes in him. These must be some crazy good fish if the king is being this lenient on the prince. Even the royal advisor has to remind the player that the king does put his children before fish. As the boys arrive at the shrine, Maribel surprises and berates them for not including her, as she had noticed them running all over the island. To make up for her missing out on the fishing trip, she insists that she should be allowed to come along, so the duo becomes a trio. From there, it's just a matter of returning to the table and placing this final shard. And after all this desire for adventure and running around the kingdom and puzzle solving, something amazing happens. The table begins to emit light, the room swirls, and the trio wakes up in a forest outside. They have no idea how they got there, don't recognize the forest, and find it strange how dark everything is. Maribel declares the adventure over and leaves the group to head back home, only to run into a group of slimes. And it's here, roughly 3 hours into my playtime, that Dragon Quest VII features its first battle. It's one of the most contentious parts of the game from my understanding, and after playing it myself, I don't know why. If I had a better understanding of the buttons or hadn't gotten lost from Maribel's mom, I could have easily cut this opening down to 2.5 hours, even less if I had figured out the puzzles sooner. Someone who really knows the game and doesn't bother with NPC dialogue could probably get it below 2 hours. This is nowhere near as long as the Persona series, for example. But I suspect there are two factors to why Dragon Quest VII has a worse reputation. The first is that in the era it was released, this kind of lengthy opening was far from common. It stands out as a memorable part of the game. The second is that Persona makes sure to have at least a few battles in its opening minutes to at least introduce the combat system. After that, the story is heavily focused on establishing characters, settings, and the basic plot. It's not like Dragon Quest VII doesn't have those elements, but it's more aimless. There's a lot of back and forth between locations, much of the world is established through NPC dialogue, and without prior knowledge, there's been no indication of exactly what the plot will be. This is an opening focused more on mystery and adventure, and I think it captures that feeling well. In fact, I'll even declare that I really like this opening. This small world and these characters have me curious as to what exactly is in store for the adventure. And it's bolstered even more by the music. I haven't mentioned it yet, but the switch to CD quality seems to have empowered Sugiyama, as these are some of my favorite tracks from him to date. I actually played more beyond this point, where the mystery of this new world is only expanded. There's a warrior woman next to some graves who's attempting to plant grass to honor the dead. Seeds for flowers are seemingly gone, leading to Maribel offering the seeds that she happens to have on hand. This act of kindness ingratiates the group to the warrior, who offers to escort them to a nearby town. But as soon as they reach it, she disappears. The town itself is in a sorry state. Only men can be found, and they're all dismantling the scant few buildings that remain. Talking to them reveals that monsters have kidnapped their women and defeated their strongest warriors, demanding that they tear down their own homes in conciliation. The only warrior that remains is hidden away in a small cabin with his son, as he barely clings to life. His wounds will kill him, and the only way to survive is by obtaining a green gem from a nearby mine. But even the mine is overrun by monsters. The group doesn't discuss it, but it's obvious the next portion of the game is entering the mine to get the gem. The town would serve as a base while the party grinds, as it has an inn and weapon shop, and it's here that the proper adventure would begin. I love this hook, and I do know the basic conceit of Dragon Quest VII, which I feel would be revealed by the time the group saves this village, or perhaps even the island, from the monsters. I know the game is incredibly long, which may drag down the proceedings, but in terms of an opening, I only have minor issues. It flows well, it establishes the cast, and there's enough mysteries to keep me invested. But I must be in the minority because this opening was massively streamlined for the 3DS remake to help players reach the action more quickly. And while its modernization and faster pace is obvious, I actually prefer the PS1 opening. Let me explain by going over this alternate opening, though I won't be as detailed. It begins much the same with Kefir and the hero leaving an underground pathway, though this time Kefir is shown and given some dialogue to immediately define his character, how people feel about them snooping, and that the world seems to only be this solitary island. From there, the opening plays out as before, with Maribel grilling the hero on what he's been up to with Kefir before going to bed. The next morning is the Harvest Festival, and as before, I take the opportunity to explore and talk to everyone. While this is certainly following the same beats, there are plenty of differences both in terms of what there is to discover and its translation. In the former's case, the 3DS version is far more generous, as throughout the opening I find far more money, equipment, and pointedly chimera wings, which allow the player to teleport to previously visited towns. They want you to move quickly this time around. However, I made a point not to use them in order to better compare the opening times. Also, I'm a hoarder in every RPG. The translation feels the most stark though, as Dragon Quest VIII on the PlayStation 2 marked the change in localization, with a heavier focus on accents, more puns for monster names, and a somewhat sillier tone. The original PS1 translation isn't bad, in fact I prefer it in some cases, but the names of the towns, characters, and monsters feel more modern Dragon Quest in this case, and that's what I'm more used to. It's where I found so much charm initially. That being said, it feels weird going directly from one to the other, especially as I spent more time with the older translation. The scene for the Harvest Festival plays out exactly the same, with the hero delivering a sandwich for his father, revealing where Maribel is hiding, and then being invited to the castle by the king where Maribel decides to come along. What is different is the layout. The fishing village is mostly the same, except for a few buildings being shifted and feeling somehow smaller. But the overworld has been expanded, no longer top-down, but retaining the behind-the-back view and feeling more like Dragon Quest VIII's overworld. That's even more true as there are treasure chests to discover in the overworld for some extra money or items. It's also neat to see places in the distance, giving a better sense of scale to the island. The hermit shack can be spotted next to the cliffs below the castle town, for example. However, this overworld isn't nearly as explorable, as not only will Mirabelle stop you from going off the path at this point, but there's a gate preventing the player from exploring the northwest portion of the island. So there's literally nothing else to do but visit the castle town, which has also seen a few minor changes, specifically placing the underground path to the hermit on the left side of town rather than the right. Not exactly sure why, except that maybe the developers wanted to make it more obvious. All the dialogue in the town is mostly the same as before. Gossip about Kefir, learning that the hero's uncle is a cheat and layabout, and getting a sense of the world. The only new dialogue mentions that there are ferocious bears in the mountains to the east. And no, if they even exist, they can't be encountered in this opening. I suspect they're merely an excuse for the town shop to sell actual equipment, something far more sparse than the PS1 original. Arriving in the castle triggers another cutscene with Kefir, who gives more backstory on what the two were up to before the shrine adventure. It turns out that they were trying to make their own boat to search the ocean, but Kefir realizes it'll never be seaworthy and instead tells of how he found an ancient book while rummaging through the castle. So he's off to the shrine while I distract his dad with the talk that I've been summoned for. If there's one thing I definitely appreciate in the remake compared to the original, it's Kefir. I already found myself liking him before, but this time his actions are explained a bit further. It shows what he's actually up to while the hero's on his own search. The conversation with the king is much the same, with him livid at Kefir for stealing his late mother's ring, and the king begging the hero to steer him down the proper path. The character beats are still there, they're just not as hammered in as much since more dialogue is given to these scenes. It makes the relations clearer and shows that there was thought in how these early beats played out. Exploring the castle is next, and its layout is actually exactly as it was before. The only substantial change I noticed was Kefir's sister. For some reason, the localization gave her a lisp, and I really can't understand why. It's not especially humorous, and I find myself feeling more sorry for her than anything else, even if she's a completely minor character. Next, it's a trek to the shrine to check on Kefir's progress, where he tells more of how it seems like the scholars of the island didn't even want to dig into its secrets. But he's having none of that and attempts to use his mother's sunstone ring to trigger something with the statue. Nothing happens, of course, and he gives the book to the hero, telling him that the hermit may be able to translate it for them. Kefir would go, but he's never gotten along with the old man. This one piece of direction cuts out the trek to find Mirabelle, who then says to talk to the shopkeep, who in turn directs the hero to the hermit. And the hermit's dialogue is mostly the same, except that he does praise Kefir while also insulting him. He thought the prince was dumb, but this initiative and problem solving puts him ahead of the dullard scholars, at least in his opinion. However, the hermit wants Kefir there, promising to have translated the book by the time they return. Kefir is in his room at the moment, where an amusing wink and a nod takes place. He complains about how many times he's gone back and forth between the castle and the shrine, trying anything he could think of, even stealing the stone from the hero's uncle to try. The fact that I actually tried that on PS1 got a good laugh out of me and made me realize that I was probably far from the only one to try that method. But this is all about picking up the pace, so Kefir gives the hero the sizzling stone to eventually give back to his uncle. Something I actually forgot to do, but the game later keeps track of. From there, it's back to the hermit, where they learn at the shrine only reacting to one with a pure heart. They set off to get to it when the guards arrive to take Kefir back to his father, leading to him waking the hero up in the middle of the night to make the attempt. The player doesn't even have to walk back themselves, just exiting the village triggers a cutscene where the two instantly arrive at the statue and use the prayer to open the sealed door. And it's here where the biggest change occurs. Entering the shrine immediately brings the player to the saints instead of a long winding path, and each saint has their chosen piece of equipment displayed behind them. There's even a piece of a tablet lying nearby waiting to be found. The most obvious addition, though, is a translucent, purple, fairy-like creature who is delighted to finally be seen by mortals and explains that they must find the saint's equipment. Exploring further reveals smaller buildings with different colors adorning their edges, and a stairway to a lower floor where blue tablets can be found on the other side of a locked cage. Things have been massively condensed. That's made all the more evident by talking with the fairy once more. Gone are the puzzles that I so enjoyed in the original. Instead, the player must merely go to the sealed door just east of the castle that blocked exploration north. That path, long sealed, is now open, and inside 2 grave sites are the 4 pieces of equipment needed. This is lame, and feels more like busy work than any of the puzzles from the original. All I need to do is enter the grave sites, go underground, hit 2 switches as I watch the piece of equipment come toward me, collect it, and repeat. There's no adventure to this, no grandeur. It's a fetch quest that removes the mystique of discovery. This is more like a grocery list. Battles are certainly the bread and butter of any RPG, but puzzles have their place too, and this might be quicker for repeat playthroughs, but it's not like the puzzles would be that much longer once the player knows how to do them. It's my biggest problem with the whole changed opening and a big reason I prefer the PS1 version. This just doesn't convey the effort and adventure it takes these two boys to finally discover something beyond their island. It's almost there on the 3DS, but everything feels too easy and too automated. But who knows, maybe I'm the odd one out for feeling this way. At any rate, the equipment is placed with the Saints and the ferry celebrates as the sealed door opens. On the other end is what's now known as the assembly room. Rather than going from room to room as before, now it's all been centralized with this ferry tasked to watch over and help with it. After a few menu choices, the correct pedestal is chosen and the 2 fragments are placed, which means it's time to return home. It plays out almost exactly the same, with the massive haul from the fisherman and the hero's dad revealing he found a strange fragment in a net. What is different is his uncle waking up and revealing that he knows we still have his sizzling stone, which he promptly takes back. Again, I have no clue as to what this man or that stone has to do with anything. But from here, the game plays out exactly as in the original. The hero tells Kefir of the fragment, they return to the shrine, Maribel insists on coming along, and a white light envelops them once the pedestal is completed, where they wake up in a mysterious forest. All in all, it took me an hour and 45 minutes to reach this point, effectively cutting the time in half from my original run. Make no mistake, the quicker pace is nice. It keeps things flowing while still teasing out the mystery of this lone island. And I suspect I know why the shrine was changed so much. Every time a new set of fragments had to be placed on a pedestal to reach the next location, the player had to travel through the winding set of paths. Making the shrine 2 rooms cuts down on a trek that would definitely get old as time went on. But there had to have been a way to put the puzzles down an alternate path that didn't disrupt the flow of the 2 main rooms. Keeping those had to be a better option than visiting graves and repetitively pushing buttons. And while it may be annoying for some to wander about trying to figure out where to go next, I could see the themes the developers were aiming for. These are 2 boys determined to set out on their own. They have to work for it. Having it handed over is a faster way to reach the action, but it removes the struggle that makes the initial adventure so satisfying. I find myself incredibly curious which direction Dragon Quest VII Reimagined will fall in this regard. After all, it's clear that the overworld is seen from a top-down perspective and not a fully 3D one, so maybe it'll lean closer to the original release. And hopefully the streamlining that's done throughout the rest of the story remains the feeling of the original game. The 3DS version does do that in spots, but I think it could be refined. But more than anything, I find myself far more excited for this new remake after playing these versions. The initial characters are charming, the adventure is unique and plays into Dragon Quest's tendency to have each town be its own story arc, and I believe the game eventually introduces a class system akin to Dragon Quest III. But how do you feel after comparing these 2 openings? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to GVG, hitting the like button, and ringing that bell. We also have a Patreon at patreon.com/gvgaming with plenty of extra perks. Until next time, bye!